welcome to Inkquiring Minds. My name is Doug and I'm back with another Pen Resurrection Sunday video. Today's pen cadaver on the slab, waiting for resurrection to the land of the living and writing, is this beautiful 1941 Parker Vacumatic Emerald Pearl 3rd generation. I've restored quite a few Parker Vacumatics now, and it's been a while since I've given everyone a short history lesson on what has become my favorite vintage fountain pen to restore. So before I triage this pen to see what it might require to join the land of the living, let's look into its past. Or you can simply skip ahead using the chapters below. For the 3 or 4 of you still watching, gather round kiddies, because Grandpa is going to tell you the tale of a very popular and extremely well designed and manufactured fountain pen. I mentioned that this Parker Vacumatic is from this model's 3rd generation. There are only 3 generations of Vacumatics. Early models were produced in 1932, before the name Vacumatic was finally given to the model and engraved on the barrels starting in 1933. Parker made the pens until 1948, when the model was replaced by the Parker 51. But Parker Canada continued to make the Vacumatic until 1953. The Vacumatic filling system was quite the innovation, and Parker spent lots of money and 5 years developing it before it was released in the early 30s. Instead of the usual filling system of the day, where a lever would squeeze a latex sac to suck up ink, the Vacumatic was a totally new concept. The inside volume of the barrel would be used as an ink reservoir by having a pump create a vacuum inside the barrel to siphon up ink through a straw-like breather tube. I did a video on how that system works using a Parker 51 demonstrator loaned to me by my friend Murray, and you can see that video by clicking right up there. Another innovation was that the barrel was made of stacked celluloid with alternating bands of clear celluloid, so ink levels can be seen through the barrel. The early Vacumatics were turned from solid rods of stacked celluloid. Those barrels were only pearlescent on 2 sides, the other 2 sides being dark. Later generations had the barrels made from flat sheets of stacked celluloid that were turned on mandrels, and the pearlescence went all the way around, like this one. The celluloid was an innovation as well. Parker commissioned the DuPont Chemical Company to develop the stacked pearlescent and translucent celluloid. The 3 generations were never identified by Parker. These pens have just been categorized into these 3 phases through the evolution of the changes made in the design and manufacturing. The 1st generation starts in 1933, when the name is applied to the barrels. 1st generation Vacumatics are called lockdowns, and they can be identified by the lockdown aluminum and brass pump rod, double jewels, a short blind cap that covers that lockdown filler, and a feathered arrow clip designed by Joseph Platt. You remove the blind cap, the rod is turned and springs out. The rod is then pushed down repeatedly to fill the barrel with ink, and then you lock down the rod again and put on the blind cap. The 2nd generation is called Speedline and began in 1937 and continued through 1941. The major change was that the aluminum and brass Vacumatic pump rod no longer locked down. It was a simpler mechanism that required the lengthening of the blind cap to accommodate the long rod. Most Speedline Vacs are double jeweled, but there are exceptions. And although there are exceptions here as well, Parker stopped using the stacked celluloid on the sections as they had in Generation 1, and instead made the sections from black ebonite. And in 1937, Parker began to start using a newly designed clip called the split arrow or blue diamond clip, and that blue diamond indicated a lifetime warranty. The Speedline Vacs can be found with both the arrow and the blue diamond clips, and either 1 or 2 jewels. The 3rd generation Vacs were called the plastic fillers, as the aluminum and brass Vacumatic knob was replaced by celluloid in an effort to save those metals for war production starting in 1942. The 3rd gen Vacumatics continued to be made in the US until it was discontinued in 1948. As I mentioned before, you can still find the Vacumatics made by the Canadian Parker plant in Toronto up until 1953. There you go, there will be a quiz. Now let's see what this 1941 Emerald Pearl Vacumatic needs to live again. There's very minor scuffing and wear from years and years of use, but no major scratches that I can find. And I think this is a rather unusual 3rd generation Parker Vacumatic. It is from 1941, And we can see that in the imprint right there. There's a 1 with no dots. So that means the fourth quarter of 1941. And we all know what happened in the fourth quarter of 1941. December 7th, 1941, the Japanese attacked Pearl Harbor and the U.S. was thrust into World War II. And it was at that point that Parker redesigned the rod of their speedline filler to be celluloid rather than metal, so they saved all that metal for the war years. The barrel and blind cap were probably made as speedline, aluminum speedline fillers. The clip is the transition split arrow, non-blue diamond clip, and it's double jeweled. So I don't think I've seen a third generation Parker Vacumatic that is double jeweled before. I know they're out there, but I've never seen one. And so it might be that the body of this pen was made for the aluminum filler, and by the time they built this pen and put a pump in it, they had used the plastic celluloid rod rather than the aluminum one. The pen is 5 inches in length, and with 2 cap bands, it is a junior. The junior had 2 cap bands, the major had the wide cap band, and the standard had 3 cap bands, but they're all relatively the same length. Unscrew the cap, we see the black ebonite section and the 14 karat gold nib. The imprint on that is very faint. I'm going to get my loop out. All that's visible is Parker USA and the arrow, and just down there, just close to the section, there's just the top of a 1. So I'm expecting that nib to be from 1941 as well. And the feed is ebonite, of course, and there's a very light imprint of an A on the bottom of that. I've seen W for wide, for the broad and stub nibs, means that the feed has a wide channel. The A might mean architect, but this is not an architect nib. That nib and feed are slightly offset, so that can be fixed. And the nib tip is in excellent shape. I've looked at this under my loop and my USB microscope, and it is perfectly aligned and looks very smooth and nice. So it looks like this pen might just need a simple polish. What we really need to know is whether that pump will come out or not. And the barrel is translucent, as you can see. And when I pump this, I see the tip of the pump moving up and down, but I don't really feel a latex diaphragm in there. There may be one, but I've tested this with water and it doesn't suck up any ink. Let's see if we can get this section off. These things generally were not shellacked down. They're screw threaded into the barrel, but many years of dried up ink can make them difficult to remove. No, so I'll need some heat on that, and then once I've got that off, we'll be able to knock out the feed and the nib, and I'll be able to inspect the inside of the barrel and see the head of that pump inside the barrel. But the first thing I always want to do is soak this in a bath of pen flush, which is 9 parts distilled water and 1 part ammonia, in the ultrasonic bath for just a couple of minutes to loosen up any old ink, and then we can go at it with the heat gun. So I got it out of the bath and it's still not budging out of that section, so we're going to apply some heat with my heat gun. Again, celluloid has a very low melting temperature, so while I'm heating, I'm going to be testing it and heating and testing to make sure that I don't deform that barrel. And there, that's all it took. About 10 seconds of heat and it's come loose. And I see a little bit of old shellac there. It gave up very nicely. And there we are. So I'm going to put that in the pen flush there for a couple of minutes just to flush out all that old ink. Then I'll look at this barrel with my inspection camera. So now let's take out that breather tube. There we go. Black celluloid looks broken on this one end. Let's get our block out and see if we can knock this feed out. Slightly off camera here. Give it a few taps. And there it is. There's the nib. You can quite clearly see there's a 1 with a dot. So that means the third quarter of 1941. So that would have been in the summer of 1941. The barrel was made in the fall of 1941. Let's put it over here, and we'll put the polished version over on the right side to see the difference. Gold, even this old gold, will polish up like brand new on the buffer. And we'll polish up the bottom of that feed as well, so that it's all nice and shiny. And we'll clean up the threads on that section and do a polish on it as well. So now let's take the inspection camera and go down inside the barrel here and give the pump a few pumps. Yeah, and we can see that the diaphragm is all twisted up there. That's not behaving properly at all. So the diaphragm may look like it's intact, but somehow it's twisted on itself, and so that's why it's not bringing up any ink at all. So here we have the nib all polished up. Put it up here on this side. You can see it compared to what it did look like. Beautiful. And we have the section all nice and shiny and buffed up. Ebonite shines up so nicely. And there's the ebonite feed, shiny like it's brand new. It's 41 all over again. Put those parts aside, and now we have to try to get this vacuum pump out of there because we need to replace that diaphragm. So now we get our top secret tool to remove a Parker Vacumatic pump, and that's from the inky nib that you can get from Scott, and this works wonders. You take the collet out, put it on the end of the pump, tighten it down nice and tight. I'll put on finger cots for this because all this twisting always wrecks my fingertips. When you wreck fingertips, you have to go to the doctor. Say, doctor, will I be able to play the violin? And he said, oh yeah, you should be able to play the violin. So that's great, because I could never play the violin before. And let's see whether we can grip onto this, grip onto the barrel, and see if it'll turn. No. So we have to apply a little bit of heat. I've already soaked it quite a bit. So I add some heat and test and heat and test. I think I got it. Sometimes the collet slips and it feels like it's moving. Boy, that was totally stuck. It started to warp my silicone mat. That's how hot it was. So we take it out to this point. If you pull any more, you're going to break that. You're going to break that celluloid rod. So at this point, I'll remove the collet and then get a rod out to push it the rest of the way through. The thing about pushing this through is you don't want to damage that pellet retainer, that ebonite pellet retainer at the top of the pump that holds the diaphragm in. Felt it moving a bit. There. So now we can see the state of that pump that I saw through the inspection camera. You can see that that diaphragm is all deformed and twisted, and it's not functioning the way it's supposed to. So let's just pull that right off of there. It's still attached to the seat here, and that isn't glued on there at all. It's just pressure fit, that little ramp there. Oh, and the pellet retainer is in perfect condition. Look at that. The pellet's still in there. I went to drill that out with my Dremel tool. We'll do that next, and we'll get a new diaphragm into this pen. In the meantime, this barrel is going to go back in the bath, and then I'm going to clean it out with some test tube cleaning brushes to get the inside all spick and span. All of that diaphragm seemed to come out, so there shouldn't be any residual latex around those threads, but I'll just check them to make sure that it's all pristine and clean. So I got these wonderful tiny mini drill bits off of AliExpress, and I take the biggest of the smallest, and I'm going to drill into that celluloid pellet right there and break it up into pieces to get it out. And the trick is not to damage that ebonite retainer. So I put my spectacles on for this so I can see close up what I'm doing. So now I've drilled a little hole in that pellet. I'll get out my dental tool kit, and we'll use one of the probes to pull that celluloid bead out of there. Sometimes it'll come and sometimes it won't. They're finicky that way. I think it's almost in pieces. I'm going to try to drill it more. Jeez, boy, that took a long time. You look, there's only half of it left, and there's the rest of it's right in there. Man, I slightly deformed the cup. So I'm going to heat it a little bit and try to reshape it. That ebonite can get a little bit soft when you heat it, and I can reshape it. There, I reshaped it a bit with my nib pliers. Still some debris in there. Give it a shot with some compressed air, and it looks good. The other thing you have to watch out about heat is that rod is celluloid, and where it's attached to the ebonite rod is celluloid. It has a much lower melting temperature than ebonite. So I think that's going to take a new diaphragm in there very well. The mechanism is working perfectly, and that took a bit of doing, but we're in business. So that barrel is now all nice and spick and span and clean. You can see there's a few blemishes in the celluloid, but it is nice and translucent now. Now we get out a new standard diaphragm, and we get out our pellet pusher from the inky nib, and we get out some talc, and we're going to cut this diaphragm to size. There's a mark right there on the pellet pusher, and I have to take a little bit off to start with, just so I get it to the length where it'll meet the pellet. There we go. And I can just feel with my fingernail where that mark is through the latex sac. There it is. Make a mark with my blade and then snip it off at that point, and it should be exactly the right length. Now, those of you that don't have this mark, let's measure that. And from the pellet to the end of the sac is 33.5 millimeters. So that's your measurement, 33.5 millimeters. It's not good if it's either too short or too long. The pump just doesn't work properly. And we're going to get a nice amount of talc on this latex to allow it to slide back on itself. Very important, because latex tends to stick to itself. So now we take the pellet pusher and we push it into the retainer with a click. That's good. And there we go. So now this might take a long time. This may take a short time. I can never tell whether it's going to work or not. I don't seem to be able to find a technique that really works for me, although I've been getting better at it recently. So we fold this latex sac back on itself so it makes a cuff. So you see that little cuff, and then you just keep pushing that cuff down towards the pump. You sort of have to worry it on there. Now at this point it doesn't really want to go anymore, so what I do is I push it right off the pellet pusher and on to that little shelf right there if I can, and then try to grip it right there. Now it's doubled and this isn't correct, but you can see how I've got it on that little shelf right there. So I'm not going to try to hold it with my fingernail while I push down on the pump and try to get it to unstick itself, because as you can see it's doubled up. There we go. Now that's what it's supposed to look like, and this behaves just like the diaphragm in your chest. When it moves up and down, it creates pneumatic pressure in and out and allows you to breathe in and out and in and out, and that's what this does inside the barrel. It moves in and out and draws up ink through that breather tube by creating a pneumatic pressure inside here, and ink just spills up through this straw like sipping a milkshake through a straw. So now at this point we want to reattach the pump to the barrel, and we're going to use a little bit of silicone oil on just the end of that cuff just to lubricate it, because there's a little ridge right there. Maybe you can see it, that little ridge. You have to get this cuff past to get to those threads. And while I'm at it, I'm going to put some silicone oil on those threads as well, just to make the threads mesh properly and make it easier to get it into the barrel. So at this point I just sort of give it a little bit of a twist back and forth until it goes past that shelf right there, that little lip. Now we can engage the threads, and we put the collet back on here, and I'm just going to run it back and forth. It still is very tight, but I want to make sure it doesn't bind inside there. Now I hear it moving in there. I'm just going to make it hand tight, and then we're going to inspect again with my inspection camera. Take the collet off and inspect with my inspection camera and push it up and down to see if it's functioning correctly, and it seems to be. So now it's the next day, and I have put the nib back in the section and lined it up. Took a bit of doing to get that nib back in there, and I've replaced the breather tube and cleaned off those threads. There was a lot of shellac left on those threads. Again, that's not usual. So someone has replaced the sack on this fountain pen previously and shellacked the section shut. I generally don't think that's necessary. A good amount of silicone grease on those threads, and it allows the user to clean this pen out more frequently by just undoing the section and rinsing it out with a syringe, and then replacing the silicone grease on there to keep any leaks from happening, and closing it back down again. So now that I got the nib in there, I'm going to do a dip test and see how it writes. So we get out some Watermans and just dip that nib a little bit, and we have a 1941 Parker Vacumatic Emerald Pearl. Very wet indeed, and has a good amount of feedback. It's not scratchy at all, but there's feedback here. So I've checked the tines and they are aligned properly, but what I'm going to do is smooth them out with some micromesh. But I think because that nib doesn't need to come out of there again, I'm going to try to fill this pen. So the first thing we want to do is get out our weigh scale, 10.25, which is just about perfect. Press tear, take off the blind cap, put the blind cap back on the scale. I've forgotten to do that before, been confused about the weight difference. And we're going to pump up some ink. Usually it takes 5 or 6 strokes for that breather tube to siphon up a total amount of ink inside that barrel. We put it back on the scale and we get 1.39, 1.4 milliliters of ink, which is perfect. That's great. Yeah, it's flowing very, very nicely. So and this is about a 0.4 to 0.5 millimeter line. And I measured with my pad. Yeah, 0.4. which makes it a Western fine nib. It's the line variation. Let's see. Yeah, there's a good amount of bounce. This is not a flex nib, and it's certainly not an accountant nib. I misspoke earlier and called that architect. That A stands for accountant, I think. But this is not an accountant nib. It's not hard and fine and inflexible. It actually has a good amount of bounce to it. So next up, now that I've got the pen working nicely, we need to polish up this barrel and cap. I want to take the hardware off, and I do that by inserting a pencil in the cap and put the cap on the Watermans, because that's an accident waiting to happen, and then use a piece of rubber matting and pull on the clip, push on the pencil, and unscrew that end finial. Now that looked like it was really easy because I had previously loosened it up. It took quite a bit of, it took a little bit of heat, took a little bit of soaking to get that brass nut to release, and it took a little bit more time and heat to get this jewel, this plastic jewel, to unscrew from the brass nut. But I got it off. Sometimes I can't, and the good thing about getting that off is that there's a slot right there that you can tighten the clip down on the cap to secure that clip properly, and then just screw in the jewel afterwards. And I want to polish that jewel too, because it has some bite marks in it. And I soaked both of these pieces in pen flush. But I take the clip off so I can get at that cap and polish it properly. I'm going to masking tape those gold rings for the first levels of micromesh. So here's the micromesh chart. It goes from 1500 grit to 12,000. When we get to about 32 or 36 or even 4,000 grit, up in these middle finer grits, that's when I'll take the masking tape off, and then I can polish the gold at the same time with these finer meshes. Once I've completed with the micromesh at 12,000, I put it on my buffer wheel and polish it with some polishing compounds of very, very fine grits. And I'll also go at this clip and polish it up. Let's put it over here so we can see before. This is what the clip looks like before. And on the other side of the screen, I'll put up what the polished clip looks like. As to the blind cap, well, I've tried everything to get that end jewel out, and it will not budge. So it was fairly chewed up as well. It had some bite marks in it and stuff. So I've sanded that down with some 400 grit, and I'm going to polish this up as part of the barrel. And to prepare the barrel for polishing, I'm going to empty this pen of ink and take the section off, put it aside, and we'll polish this whole thing as a unit. If you polish the blind cap and the barrel together, you won't round off those edges and find a seam between the blind cap and the barrel. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to polish up that clip. And there is the clip right off the buffer, all polished up and shining brand new. Love it. And here's what the cap looks like before polishing. And we'll put it on the other side after I finish polishing it. And here is the cap, all polished up and brand new. The gold cap bands polished up nicely. I took the masking off when I got to 4000 grit, and that polished up that gold nicely. But you have to be careful. Not all gold plating is alike. So some gold plating on some products will be very, very thin. Fortunately, these 1940s Parker Vacumatics, the gold plating was very, very thick, and the clips were gold filled, and so they take a good amount of polishing and don't show through to brass. But you still have to be careful. Test them first before you polish vigorously. Now let's put this clip back together again and take that jewel out, and we're going to put the clip between the two breather holes. One, there's the other. Gives it some symmetry somehow. And we put our brass nut in place. Get out my trusty pencil, make sure we're lined up, and tighten down the clip. It's pretty good, it's not budging. And before I put that jewel in, I'm going to just sand it down a little bit and get those bite marks out of there, and then go through and polish it back up again. And now I've polished up the jewel. I just put it back in the top finial, tighten it down with some rubber mat, and there we go, all shiny. Just a slight dimple there. That plastic jewel is very thin, so I didn't want to go too far, but it's very shiny and new. Now let's go at the barrel. So here is the barrel before polishing, and it has a good amount of wear and the typical markings from the cap. There's all kinds of horizontal scores along there from where the cap has been capped and uncapped many times, but no big gouges. I'm going to avoid the imprint until I get to about 3600 or 4000 grit, and I'm going to avoid that end finial until I get to 4000 grit as well, and then polish up that end jewel in place. And here's the barrel all polished up and gorgeous. That end jewel is all shiny gold as well, and there's the imprint still in place. So this section was shellacked in place when whoever replaced the previous diaphragm shellacked that section down, cleaned out all the shellac, and when I put this into the barrel, it's a bit sloppy because those threads are a bit big. And so I'm thinking that usually I would not shellac this down, and I'm not going to shellac this down this time either. But just silicone oil on there is probably not going to keep this from leaking. So I'm going to put silicone grease on as well. There's a difference in viscosity. The silicone oil is very low viscosity, but the silicone grease is more like a paste, and you can get this at your hardware store as well. It's Plumber's silicone grease. So I'm just going to use a cotton swab here and lay on and paste on some grease, put on a good amount, and then let the threads work the grease around and wipe off any excess. There, and now my nib needs a final polish with my jeweler's polishing cloth, and I think we have a successful pen resurrection, and I'll be back with my thoughts about this resurrection right now. So what are my thoughts about this resurrection? Well, I wish they would all go this well. I was hoping this would be a pleasant resurrection experience. This pen was in pretty good shape when I got it. There were no deep gouges or bite marks, and it didn't cause me any real problems except for that end finial not wanting to come off. But I got it polished up anyway. And I was also hoping for the best for this pen too, because it's unusual. I've not seen a third generation Parker Vacumatic with the celluloid pump with a double jewel before. Most of the third generation have a rounded blind cap, and they had ditched the double jewel configuration after the introduction of the third generation. So I'm sure there are others out there that are like this, but I've just never seen one. Now here's a chart of the 3 generations of Parker Vacumatics that I got off of David Isaacson's website, and you can see the bottom row of the chart says third 1942 plus, and the jewels were single with the plastic filling unit. So this and other things makes me feel that this pen is unique. The nib was in really good shape, just needed polishing, and it writes beautifully and wet. There were no gouges out of that section, and the Vacumatic pump came out relatively easily, and all it had was a tangled up diaphragm inside from the previous restoration. The barrel is now beautifully translucent, and the pen takes a marvelous 1.45 milliliters of ink, and the pearlescent shine of this pen is quite remarkable. And when I tested that nib, it wrote very well, nice and wet, and has a little bit of bounce to it. It was a little bit feedbacky, not scratchy, so I did some figure eights on 8,000 grit and then 12,000 grit, and now it's writing like a dream. So there you go, another successful pen back from the dead. And if you're interested in purchasing this pen, I'm selling it for $180 US plus shipping. All you have to do is email me at inkquiringminds@gmail.com with your name and your address, and I'll get you a shipping quote. If you're in the US, you will have to pay duties and taxes and fees on top of that price. And so shipping is no longer $10 to the US, it's about $20 right now, but I'll get you a quote. Everywhere else in the world, just send me your address and I'll get you a quote for shipping. And there you have it. If you like this video, please like and subscribe, and don't forget to ring that bell to get instant notifications whenever a new video is posted. And you can join as a member of my channel for only 99 cents a month, and I guarantee I'll answer your comments in the comment section, and you'll get cool emojis, badges, sneak peek unboxing videos, as well as instant access to my videos the moment I post them. And that just leaves it for me to say thank you. For watching. And that's all she wrote.
I made this.